Quadash, 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 Adonai, Elohim, Sabayath, meaning holy, 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 Lord of hosts. That is the prayer that the angels sing day and night. Yah, He, Va, He, the four syllables equaling divine masculine, divine feminine, divine masculine, divine feminine. In the beginning, Elohim said, "Let us create them in our image. As above, so below." The macro prosophist above and the micro prosophist below. Because we are the microorganisms in the host of the Elohim. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat coming from the planetary name Shabbatai, which correlates with Saturn, and Saturn correlates with Saturday. But we go by the Shabbat being Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. But the name Shabbat comes from the planetary name of Saturn, which is Shabbatai, which correlates with Saturday. All right. Today we're going to go into another one of the 7 hermetic principles, and each one of the principles, we have the principle of causation, the principle of vibration, the principle of rhythm, the principle of gender, the principle of polarity, the principle of, what else? Polarity, correspondence, and so on. But today we're going back into the Kabbalion, the 3 initiates, and we're going to break down the principle of rhythm. It's very key. These 7 principles can change your life dramatically, and I think it's a must that people know these things and start applying them to their daily lives, and they'll understand why certain things happen the way they do and how they work. All right, let's get into it. Rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tide. All things rise and falls. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The Kabbalion. The great 5th Hermetic principle, the principle of rhythm, embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, a to and from movement, a flow and inflow, a swing forward and backwards, a pendulum like movement, a tide like ebb and flow, a high tide and a low tide. Between the 2 poles manifest on the physical, mental, or spiritual planes. The principle of rhythm is closely connected with the principle of polarity, described in the preceding chapter. Rhythm manifests between the 2 poles established by the principle of polarity. This does not mean, however, that the pendulum of rhythm swings to the extreme poles, for this rarely happens. In fact, it is difficult to establish the extreme polar opposite in the majority of cases, but the swing is ever towards first one pole and then the other. There is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking, manifested in all of the airs and phenomena of the universe: suns, worlds, men, animals, plants, minerals, forces, energy, mind, and matter. Yes, even spirit manifests the principle. The principle manifests in the creation and destruction of worlds, and the rise and fall of nations, and the life history of all things, and finally in the mental state of man, beginning with the manifestations of spirit of the all. It will be noticed that there is ever the outpouring and indrawing, the outbreathing and inbreathing of Brahm, as the Brahmins worded. Universes are created, reach their extreme low point of maturity, and then begin in their upward swing. Suns spring into being, and then their height of power being reached, the process of retrogression begins, and after eons, they become dead masses of matter, awaiting another impulse, which starts again their inner energies into activity in new solar life cycles is begun. And thus it is with all the worlds they are born, grow, and die, only to be reborn. And thus it is with all, thus it is. Hold on, where did I left off? In the world, power, reach, and process, restoration, man. Impulses which starts again their inner energies into activity in a new solar life cycle is begun. And thus it is with all the worlds they are born, grow, and die, only to be reborn. And thus it is with all the things of shape and form. They swing from action to reaction, from birth to death, from activity to inactivity, and then back again. Thus it is with all living things. They are born, grow, and die, and then are reborn. So it is with all great movements, philosophies, creeds, fashions, governments, nations, and all else. Birth, growth, maturity, decadence, death, and then new birth. The swing of the pendulum is ever in evidence. Night follows day, and day night. The pendulum swings from summer to winter, and then back again. The corpuscles, atoms, molecules, and all masses of matter swing around the circle of their nature. There is no such thing as absolute rest or cessation from movement, and all movement partakes of rhythm. The principle is of universal application. It may be applied to any question or phenomenon of any of the many planes of life. It may be applied to all phases of human activity. There is always the dramatic swing from one pole to another. Universe pendulum is ever in motion. The tide of life flow in and out according to law. The principle of rhythm is well understood by modern science and is considered a universal law as applied to material things. But the Hermeticists carry the principle much further and know that it manifests and influence extends to the mental activities of man, and that it accounts for the bewildering succession of moods, feelings, and other annoying, perplexing changes that we notice in ourselves. But the Hermeticists, by studying the operations of this principle, have learned to escape some of the activities by transmutation. The Hermetic masters long since discovered that while the principle of rhythm was invariable and ever in evidence in mental phenomenon, still there were two planes of its manifestation so far as mental phenomena are concerned. They discovered that there were two general planes of consciousness, the lower and the higher, the understanding of which fact enables them to rise to the higher plane and thus escape the swing of the rheumatic pendulum which manifested on the lower plane. In other words, the swing of the pendulum occurred on the unconscious plane and the consciousness was not affected. This they call the law of neutralization. its operations consist in the raising of the ego above the vibrations of the unconscious plane of mental activity so that the negative swing of the pendulum is not manifested in consciousness, and therefore they are not affected. It is akin to rising above a thing and letting it pass beneath you. The Hermetic master or advanced student polarizes himself at the desired pole, and by a process akin to refusing to participate in the backward swing, or if you prefer, a denial of its influence over him, he stands firm in his polarized position and allows the mental pendulum to swing back along the unconscious plane. All individuals who have obtained any degree of self mastery accomplish this more or less unknowingly, and by refusing to allow their moods and negative mental states to affect them, they apply the law of neutralization, balance. The master, however, carries this to a much higher degree of proficiency, and by the use of his will, he obtains a degree of pose and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of those who allow themselves to be swung backwards and forwards by the mental pendulum of moods and feelings. The importance of this will be appreciated by any thinking person who realizes what creatures of mood, feelings, and emotions the majority of people are, and how little mastery of themselves they manifest. If you will stop and consider a moment, you will realize how much these swings of rhythm have affected you in your life, how a period of enthusiasm has been invariably followed by an opposite feeling and mood of depression. Likewise, your moods and periods of courage have been succeeded by equal moods of fear, and so it has ever been with the majority of persons. Tides of feelings having have ever has ever been with the majority of persons. Tides of feelings have ever risen and fallen with them, but they have never suspected the cause or reason of the mental phenomenon. And understanding of the working of this principle will give one the key to the mastery of these rheumatic swings of feeling, and will enable him to know himself better and to avoid being carried away by these inflows and outflows. The will is superior to the conscious manifestation of the principle, although the principle itself can never be destroyed. We may escape its effects, but the principle operates nevertheless. The pendulum ever swings, although we may escape being carried along with it. There are other features of operation of this principle of rhythm, of which we wish to speak at this point. There comes into its operations that which is known as the law of compensation. One of the definitions or meanings of the word compensation is the counterbalance, which is the sense in which the Hermeticists use the term. It is the law of compensation to which the Kabbalion refers when it says the measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates the law. Compensates. The law of compensation is that the swing in one direction determines the swing in the opposite direction, or the opposite pole. The one balances or counterbalances the other. On the physical plane, we see many examples of this law. The pendulum of the clock swings a certain distance to the right and then an equal distance to the left. The seasons balance each other in the same way. The tide follow the same law, and the same law is manifest in all the phenomenon of rhythm. The pendulum with a short swing in one direction has but a short swing in another, while the long swing to the right invariably means the long swing to the left. An object hurled upward to a certain height has an equal distance in traverse on its return. The force with which a projectile is sent upwards a mile is produced when the projectile returns to the earth on its return journey. This law is consistent on the physical plane as reference to the standard authorities will show you, but the Hermeticists carry it still further. They teach that a man's mental states are subject to the same law. The man who enjoys keenly is subject to keen suffering, while he who feels but little pain is capable of feeling but little joy. The pig suffers but little mentally and enjoys but little. He is compensated. On the other hand, there are other animals who enjoy keenly, but whose nervous organisms and temperament cause them to suffer exquisite degrees of pain, and so it is with man. There are temperaments which permit of but low degrees of enjoyment and equally low degrees of suffering, while there are others which permit the most intense enjoyment but also the most intense suffering. The rule is that the capacity for pain and pleasure in each individual are balanced. The law of compensation is full is in full operation here, but the Hermeticists go still further in this matter. They teach that before one is able to enjoy a certain degree of pleasure, he must have swung as far proportionately towards the other pole of feeling. They hold, however, that the negative is in precedent to the positive in this matter. That is to say that in experiencing a certain degree of pleasure, it does not follow that he will have to pay up for it with a corresponding degree of pain. According to the law of compensation for a degree of pain previously experienced either in the present life or in a previous incarnation, this throws a new light on the problem of pain. Hermeticists regard the chain of lives as continuous and as forming a part of one life of the individual, so that in consequence the rhythmic swing is understood in the way, while it would be without meaning unless the truth of reincarnation is admitted, you know? And just to show you that reincarnation is real, it tells you that all throughout the Bible. With Jesus, it tells you about that with Enoch, it tells you about that with Elijah, you know, how all these individuals came back in different carnations. But the Hermeticists claim that the master or advanced student is able to a great degree to escape the swing mentioned by rising on to the higher planes of the ego. Much of the experience that comes to those dwelling on the lower plane is avoided and escaped. The law of compensation plays an important part in the lives of men and women. It will be noticed that one generally pays the price of anything he possesses or lacks. If he has one thing, he lacks another. The balance is struck. No one can keep his penny and have the bit of cake at the same time. Everything has its pleasant and unpleasant sides. The things that one gains are always paid for by the things that one loses. The rich possess much that the poor lack, while the poor often possess things that are beyond the reach of the rich. The millionaire may have the inclination towards feasting and the wealth wherewith to secure all the dainties and luxuries of the table, while he lacks the appetite to enjoy the same. He envies the he envies the appetite and digestion of the laborer who lacks the wealth and inclinations of the millionaire who gets more pleasure from his plain food than the millionaire could obtain, even if his appetite were not jaded, nor his digestion ruined, for the wants, habits, and inclinations differ, and so it is through life. The law of compensation is ever in operation, striving to balance and counterbalance, and always succeeding in time, even through several lives may be required for the return swing of the pendulum of rhythm. Salah. That is the principle and the law of rhythm. Yesterday we did the principle of polarity, which is duality, how things work in two. But the way the Most High created everything, He created everything to harmonize with each other. So everything is in harmony. So you have to know the yin and the yang. You can't have one without the other. You can't have the divine masculine, the Father who art in heaven, without the divine feminine, Mother Nature, and the choke mom, Mother Wisdom, who are in the earth, the womb, where mankind was created and birthed and molded. So that is the principle and the law of rhythm. I'm going to go through all of the seven. We still got the law of cause and effect. We're going to break down, the law of gender, the law of correspondence, the law of vibrations, and so on. And I'm going to do one video at a time and break them down. And you have to use mentalism. You have to meditate on these things. And the first key you want to do is start to remember the seven principles as a collective whole, the names of them, and then you want to break them down into shorts of their meaning in a compact way. Sum it down to simplify it so you can better understand it. But not understand it in you know a worldly way. So that's key. And then what you do is anything you put into your mind, you have to organize your thoughts. And with mentalism, you turn your thoughts into actions, and then you manifest them and materialize them on the physical plane. Salah, I'm out.